Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm going to do a few housekeeping things first before we welcome our guests. First is a fire announcement. In the event of a fire alarm, please proceed calmly to a nearby exit, leave the building, and move away from the door. Please take a moment to note the location of nearby exits. And be aware that the way you entered may not be the most direct way out. Sitting or standing in the aisles and doorways is not permitted, and of course, smoking is not allowed in any university building. Okay, so welcome. I am Heather Bendari, adjunct lecturer in visual art, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the very first visiting artist lecture of the 2025-2026 school year. It is great to be back. Tonight, I'm so happy to introduce Rodrigo Valenzuela, a photographer who thinks and builds with and without a camera. But before we go any further, I'd like to begin with a living land acknowledgement. Brown University is built on what is now called College Hill, part of the unceded ancestral homelands of the Narragansett Indian tribe. Indigenous people from many nations, near and far, live, study, and work in Providence today. The amplification of Native voices and histories is crucial to rectifying the many violent legacies of colonialism, and we gratefully acknowledge the ongoing critical contributions of Indigenous people within this university and across our state, region, and nation. In addition, I would like to acknowledge that we are connected by a campus that relied on the African slave trade in the Americas, and that there are buildings on campus constructed by enslaved people. We recognize that these kinds of acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustained and enriched the stolen land that we are speaking from today. These acknowledgements and much more commit us to a lifetime of decolonial and anti-racist work. Now I'd like to thank Ed Osborne, the chair of visual arts, Winnie Geyer, CJ Liu, Christine Dodd, and media services for facilitating this evening's event. A few more things to note. First, please do not record this event. We value and respect the IP of our visiting artists, and we will post our recording on our YouTube account with their permission. Still shots are great, and if you take one, please tag at Brown Visual Art and at Rodrigo Valenzuela _studio. Second, after Rodrigo's presentation, there will be a Q&A. There are 2 microphones in the aisles, which I'm sure you can see. So just come up to the mic if you have a question once Rodrigo is done. It's expected that everyone be kind, courteous, and respectful in their questions, and 1 question per person. Now, for our esteemed guest, Rodrigo Valenzuela. Rodrigo was born in Santiago, Chile in 1982. Currently, he lives and works in Los Angeles, California, where he's an associate professor and head of photography at the head of the photography department at UCLA. Valenzuela is the recipient of many awards, including the 2025 Foundation for Contemporary Art Richard Pousette-Dart Award, 2024 Lewis Comfort Tiffany Foundation Award, 2023 Harpo Foundation Grant, and the National Endowment for the Arts Grant. He has received the 2021 Guggenheim Fellowship in Photography, the Smithsonian Artist Research Fellowship, a Joan Mitchell Award. It goes on and on and on. Recent solo exhibitions include the Griffin Museum of Photography in Winchester, Mass., the Center for Maine Contemporary Art in Rockland, Maine, the Prince Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, BRIC Arts Media in New York, the Screen Series at the New Museum, Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art in Eugene, Oregon, Orange County Museum in Santa Ana, California, and the Portland Museum of Art in Oregon. Currently, he has a show up at Assia Geisberg Gallery in New York City. Recent residencies include the Headlands Center, Dora Maar Fellowship in France, Fountainhead Residency, the Core Fellowship in Houston, Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, McDowell. Again, the list goes on and on. I will also add that I am a huge fan of the way he thinks about labor, landscape, presence, and absence. His exhibitions are an experience. At a time where quick Instagram moments attract gallery visitors and everyone thinks they can take a photograph, Rodrigo's exhibitions provide hidden details, multiple entry points, and a reminder of the labor and construction that frames and reframes his decisions. I can't wait to hear him talk about it. So please help me in welcoming Rodrigo Valenzuela.
La necesidad fue algo muy rápido porque fue incluso un par de días. Por decir, un jueves estaba hablando con él y yo tenía que salir un sábado. Entonces fue así como...
¿Cuántos días tarda uno? Acá. Cuando uno llega a la frontera, ahí hay una especie como de hoteles, pero son casas de seguridad de los coyotes, donde reúnen a toda la gente que ellos van a pasar, que será un mínimo como de 80 personas o hasta 100 personas en un cuarto, más o menos, este espacio más o menos.
Dejé a mis padres y todo eso.
Saliendo uno ya no tiene que haber duda.
Tuvimos que arreglar todo, comprar zapatos, comida.
Crucé, yo intenté 2 veces, a la segunda vez pasé. La primera vez me agarraron la migra.
Y pues ahí en San Isidro, al tratar de cruzar caminando a la frontera, ahí fue donde me agarró la migra, que me iban a hacer unas preguntas, pero esas preguntas fueron como...
5 días en la cárcel, no nos daban de comer, nada, solo nos daban agua y pues no era suficiente para nosotros.
32, incluyendo a Coyote.
Nos tiraron la comida, todo lo que teníamos en la mochila nos sacaron. Lo del trabajo, no hay trabajo. Éramos 16. Pero nos separamos y la migra agarró a otros y nosotros nos escapamos. Sí, corrimos porque ya nos venían siguiendo atrás y después el helicóptero nos seguía igual. Pero como ya agarraron a los otros que se quedaron allá, estancados allá, pues allá se quedaron. Y fue donde ellos se detenieron agarrándolo a ellos y a nosotros dejaron.
La noche en el desierto está totalmente oscuro. De momentos aparecía la luna y se veía claro el camino.
Bueno, uno nunca sabe si regresar o no regresar.
Caminamos como 3 noches, partes en bicicleta, partes caminando.
Mantenerse uno despierto de noche por estar un poco más listo del peligro, puede ya ser de cualquiera, que pueda pasar un animal o algo.
Dormíamos allá en el suelo, entre las piedras, entre las ramas, allá nos quedábamos todo el día y ya cuando la tardecita llegábamos, es cuando ya caminábamos en el desierto.
Durante el día se duerme.
Lo más cabrón que pueda decir y contar uno es la sed.
Y luego, bueno, uno nunca sabe si regresar o no regresar.
Me tuve que, todos traíamos nuestros garrafones de agua, pero ya como al segundo día, pues ya nos traíamos.
Caminé 3 noches.
3 días.
Y un día, todo el día.
En el camino miras huesos, miras ropa tirada o cuerpos así que ya están, o tumbas.
Muchas cruces.
Y en una de esas correteadas que le da la migra, digamos, vamos a decir, a veces se desaparta uno de la manada.
Y nos tuvimos que separar el grupo, bueno, por miedo.
Nada más una muchacha se quedó en el camino, como que se desmayó. Y yo la vi, le palpé cómo se sacó los calcetines y todas las uñas de su pie estaban levantadas.
Me da un poco de miedo, digo, yo estoy solo en este país, me llega a pasar algo y no tengo a nadie.
Bueno, sí la dejaron pues, porque la verdad uno que más pudiera uno ayudar, o es ella o eres tú.
Cuando cruzamos por el desierto, llegamos a la orilla de la carretera allá en Phoenix.
El coyote que nos llevaba nos conectó con otro señor que nos trajo para California.
Es que cuando uno llega aquí por primera vez, uno llega aquí a lo desconocido. Es que cuando uno llega aquí por primera vez, uno llega aquí a lo desconocido.
Hi, so I like to show that video kind of as a way of introduction, so I don't have to tell you too much about my life. You know, it's like Yeah, at first I really love being here, mostly because after when I crossed the border, I came here in my early 20s. I ended up working in Boston in a construction company doing concrete, and we came a lot to Rhode Island, Western Massachusetts. In between, I lived in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I work in Manchester and New Hampshire. So this area has like weird, nostalgic slash sad memories from my time here. So for one, I love it, and second, it's like a good reminder of like what I used to do and the kind of journey I have entered, right? But so I spent a lot of time around here. And I wanted to, the second thing, early I had a studio visit, and this video remind me to tell you this. I didn't know how to make art, and I wanted to be personal, but I didn't know how to be personal about it, right? So this is the first attempt. I keep showing it. This is my MFA thesis. So this was like 2012, so 14 years ago. I thought a lot about how I can tell my story, but also it's like how unspecial is that story, right? How I cannot make it look like an NPR, kind of like This American Life story. I wanted to like how I can dissolve myself. So I basically interview a lot of people, and within the information I got through these people, I put together my personal journey, right? So it's very hard to sometimes know what to make work about, but not asking questions that you are interested, right? And sometimes with artists are like, I want to make a work about immigration. Should I ask them about immigration? It's no, you talk about what you talk to other construction guys. You happen to be immigrants. You talk about soccer, you go talk about drinking, you talk about women, and then they will tell you about their experience, right? Because it's all linked, it's all connected, right? Your sense of alienation, your loneliness is because you don't speak the language, it's because you don't have money, it's because you don't have education, it's because you feel out of place. All the things are super connected, right? So I wanted to transmit that sense of kind of alienation and loneliness and uneasiness in their face. So I know that I feel it like that. So I have to like kind of figure out how I feel and search that feeling among others and kind of collage that to make art. Does that make sense? Is that a good example? I was like, but second, it's like how you find that connection with art. Once you leave the narratives of your personal life into art away, how this also transforms something into just want to tell people that you don't have to be like, oh, if you would know something about me, you would know that this work is good, right? How you avoid that conversation. You start adding value to some materials. So you start thinking through, again, you will see a lot of landscapes. As Heather was telling you, I have a show right now. And there is a lot of a landscape, right? When you come here to USA, as an immigrant, you think I'm going to USA. But I came to Boston, and after Boston, I took the train because I didn't have papers for a long time. So I was going to Seattle and back to Boston to Seattle like 10 times because I still had the job in construction in Boston. But I was living in Seattle, Olympia, Washington, to be more specific. So I could take the train back and forth because Amtrak doesn't ask you for anything, right? So the standards are very low. It's the only medium transportation that asks you for the ticket after you're already riding. It's just like their self-esteem is so sad. So I was like driving and then moved to Seattle. And then after Seattle, I moved to Houston. And then now I live in LA. That is like 4 different USAs. So that is clear that USA is a place in the mind, right? It's something that we watch in movies. And mostly in movies, we watch the Western expansion I grew up with my grandpa watching Western movies, right? Which is a very interesting genre in itself. And, so I started making all these like landscape pictures, but I didn't want to be a landscape photographer per se. So I started making them with photocopies. And that's where sometimes you find the right language. And I was like, I will just like photocopy to me as an immigrant is the material of bureaucracy. Is it how I do it? Paperwork is how usually institutions keep you oppressed, and how to delay situations, how they manage for you to give up sometimes, right? So I started using photocopies just to create these spaces that they were, again, a psychological space because USA doesn't exist, and like as a singular feeling. And something else that's like, again, sorry, Virginia, to point out so much of it, because it's something, just having a conversation with an MFA student now, like thinking a lot about like, how do we think through work, right? A lot of the time artists think that the best way to switch, to think through art is like having a lot of ideas, right? And the problem with having a lot of ideas is that it's the same that any relationship, right? It's like, when you were younger, you probably had one problem, and because you didn't have the maturity to like, forgive or ask for forgiveness, you just like, they never talk to the person again. All the friends in middle school, you just, one problem, you are like, that person is not my friend anymore, right? And as an adult, you learn, be like, well, maybe it was me. I want to take some in your teenage years, and when you're in your early 20s, sometimes it's embarrassing to apologize on time. So then those relationships go through the cracks, right? So, but as adults, you learn, mostly in a romantic relationship, you work through it, right? And when you're gonna have a building a relationship with your work, you can't just like have 4 ideas. You're a player, so you don't want to have like all these ideas unfinished in the work. So again, I like this work, but I also wasn't into the fact that they look like a painting, or that like position these photos in a hierarchy where if the photo looks like a painting, then it's good art, right? So I wanted the photo to be like an experience of a vantage point and a photographic experience, right? So again, I don't give up in this. Like I think about the problems of the work and I lean into the problems of the work because usually that is where the answers are, right? Like my grandpa was this is the long way around, but basically the only thing I did is like back up and show the structure, which is like when you grow up poor, art is a problem that you don't understand the structure, so you think it's a mystery, so you think it's not for you. So, and like, I think as an artist, the most general thing is like, that is how it's made. If somebody decides to steal how it's made, your research and your experience then they are the ones robbing themselves of the experience of making art, right? So don't be afraid to show how you make stuff, how you think about the stuff. If somebody want to steal those moves, how much money there is to be made to be the copy of somebody else's, right? So there's something about it, about how to show that, what I'm saying about the problems is the feature sometimes is like, my grandpa was a carpenter, and I always think about this example that he gave me because it's like, if you want to make a big table, you want to make a nice table, the flatness is irrelevant, right? The surface, only really tacky people has those like marble tables, right? It's like Miami style things where you could do coke or something like that. Just that is like, the surface, the strength, that is not important, right? Once you know some carpenter, you know that the joints is where the magic is, right? So sometimes you see somebody's a very simple surface, good, and then there is a little cross joinery or some weird stuff, and then it's like this. That is where a carpenter showed to another carpenter that they know what they're talking about, right? So, and that is the only problem. The table has to be structurally sound. You should be able to dance on top of it, right? So if you make it, and then the joint is beautiful, and the beauty is where the problem will be, then it's a good table, So I think through a lot of problems like that, so usually I don't give up in little things that create. Sometimes you're the problem, but you can't just. You can't stop that. You have to So I start making these works, I'm gonna try to, because I only have 45 minutes. Also, when I was making this series of work, and again, I've been getting so consistently lucky to my life. And the fact that I didn't get arrested a bunch of times, waiting for work outside Home Depot, walking drunk back home. It's just so many things have to go right in your life to whatever, call yourself whatever successful, and it's just so mind-boggling that sometimes people ask like for advice. You know, it's like so many things have to happen in your life to not make those mistakes or just get lucky. You know, sometimes like it's complicated because you know sometimes my UCLA students, right, they ask me for advice, and my first instinct is like, I don't know, I didn't go to UCLA. It's like I was like, I'm not like you. Like I struggled to get here. Like just struggle a little bit, you know, like just muscle through it. And it's so complicated to know what is the right thing. So I just make the work, and then during this time I was making this other movie. I'm gonna try to skip to the movies because I only have 45 minutes and some of the movies are really long, but I hired these guys to make work, to make the set for this movie called Maria TV. And sometimes you're watching people and then you really think, I was like, they're doing something and you're like, oh, that is really good. They are making something. When I just left Chile, I lived in Montreal, and I used to clean offices at night. So I'm very attuned with this idea of invisible labor, like kind of going and disappearing, and the only time that like people notice that the work is done is when it's not there. You know, if the basket is empty or like it's still full, next morning people know that you didn't show up to work, right? So there is if these guys do the work properly, the green screen gonna disappear and the label gonna disappear. So it's interesting to take a picture of complete disappearance before it happens, right? Between that, I also was doing a residency in this community college in Portland, where I made this like hand drawing graffiti, like and like I asked them to make hand tools with clay that they could keep piling up. But then the movie that these guys helped me to make is this.
¿Qué quieres que haga?
Yo quiero a mi hijo. Por lo tanto, te vas a quedar aquí hasta que nazca. Quiero que te cuides para que nazca en las mejores condiciones. Quiero que seas fuerte. Eso es lo único que te pido.
No vas a volver a mirarme la cara.
Ya no tenemos nada más que hablar. Vamos a esperar el nacimiento del niño, eso es todo.
¿Y después?
Después tendrás que irte. Es lo mínimo que te puede pasar después de todo lo que hiciste. Te vas a ir para no volver nunca más.
So basically, I grew up in a house with 5 women. And so I was very attuned to them going to work every day, cleaning and working out in houses and not spending a lot of time in our house, right? So I was making a movie about, and then when you go back home as entertainment, is very part of the kind of dinner time. It's like this soap opera watching with all your family, where you make tea and and you just have like you watch soap operas in the afternoon with your family, the primetime soap operas, right? And there are also stories, kind of like where the working class person is usually in this like precarious position where basically the only way to get ahead if you get pregnant by the boss of the house, and it's a version of the same story all the time, that the only way to ascend is by like getting pregnant with somebody else, or like getting the scratchy ticket winner or something like that, right? It's like, so I hired 15 maids in Seattle to learn the script of this telenovela and kind of like recreate these scenes from the soap opera. And kind of the bad acting was part of the thing to evidence how how bad is the media representation of working class women, the flaws of it. And like eventually, obviously, these people get kind of tired of the guy kind of.
Yo sigo teniendo mucho cariño por ti, Lía. Y no me gustaría que me vieras por el resto de tu vida como a un enemigo.
No. No, por supuesto que no. Yo nunca podría mirarte como un enemigo. Bueno, pero ¿por qué no cambiamos de tema? Todo eso ya murió. Ya pasó.
Sí, tienes razón.
Yo me alegro mucho que todo haya salido bien entre ustedes.
Gracias. Sí, estamos bien. Bueno, me voy. Espero que seas muy feliz, Lía.
Estoy enojada porque me mentiste otra vez. De nuevo, te di una oportunidad y me mentiste otra vez. No puedo creer en ti más, porque de nuevo me vuelves a mentir, una y otra vez más. Por eso me siento enojada y decepcionada contigo. No creeré más en ti. No puedo hablar, no puedo decir nada. Estoy frustrada.
So eventually they get frustrated, they start working through the camera, their anger towards the camera, and then the movie dissolves into like this kind of like little like riot inside. So, and then the movie ends. So it's 17 minutes, it's all in my website. And then I was telling, also, you know, I was working in this way where I was making videos and photos and stuff like that. I got in this residency where I kind of got cabin fever, and also after that, all those landscape photos are very construction-like images. I got my first museum show. Like it was, again, it's incredibly lucky because I got it like a year after graduating college. So it was like, it's just a miracle, right? Like, so I went to this residency to make that work, and I started making work so different than before that I was really paranoid about like just shooting myself in the foot, not really making sense. But I was just like making a mess in this house too. There's like, fuck, I have to finish because I just was destroying this house. And so I just went with it, and I started, that is the picture I was making, right? I started making these works about ruins, mostly because I just have the doubts, why not ruins? You know what I mean, not ruins in the terms of like this romantic version of, there is a romantic version, right? In Peru, in Italy, in Mexico, people live with, it's like living with history. Like why America doesn't want to process history in a way that is healthy, as a way of knowledge, right? What happened, like you can go to Pittsburgh and Detroit and there is some sort of like economic symbols of economic failure, but not really like a way to learn from the past. So I basically got the Frye Museum to give me the whole space, to let me graffiti the walls with graphite, and then install this like scaffolding when I put all the photos around, and I left the paper that people were using because it's a beautiful wood floor. So it was very nice to experiment around this space and like actually not treat the space very carefully and have a series. And here I started working with something that, as like all the previous shows with the landscapes were like different landscapes, different kind of structures, right? This I started working with something that become very important in my life, which is like, how to say, it's like, I'm very worried, again, early on, because that, thanks to that show, that work I did with Diamond Box, the first video show, I got so much kind of like early success, like was nominated. There used to be a Vimeo award where they select all the videos for Vimeo and they get given awards. So that was a finalist. And then I got invited to a couple of museum shows with that work. And I was like, just finished, and I just was learning how to make art. And I was like, oh, damn, I don't want to make work about that. I mean, no, but like, I don't know how to say it. It's like, it was almost like I didn't came to the country, I struggled a lot and I got 2 degrees to just perpetuating what happened to me by chance. It's like, I wanted to come to USA, I didn't follow the laws, I just wasn't working immigrant, and then I got married, I got a green card, and all the things that happened in my life, I don't want to keep like pointing at this one point of my life try to profit as much as I can, right? I truly, because when you grow up poor, like I thought that intellect was a way to escape that poverty. So I always wanted to be like the one thing I wanted to be. Sometimes I wanted to be a soccer player, sometimes, but most of the time I wanted to be smart. And it's very frustrating because you never are smart enough, right? You always meet somebody that is like, have more wisdom or is more mentally agile than you, whatever. But this is time where I started, for the museum show, I started working in this way where like, I have an idea, and the only thing I have to do with this idea is explore as much as I can the same idea, like poke holes and figure out what is the right way to think through this idea of ruins. And most important is like why we like ruins, right? Why I like ruins, right? What am I searching? What if it's not higher knowledge? Why? That is the name of the show, the series, like hedonic reversal, right? It's like why we like to watch sad movies, like why we like to eat spicy food, like why this little pain that is kind of playful reminds us that we're human, right? So that is something about that for most I wanted to like insist in an idea. And eventually I want to have this room where like, if artists of color come to you and I want to feel like, it's like, it's like, be an intellectual of color, like be like anything you want to be. Like, you don't need to earn the right of be curious. You don't want to like reinforce who you are every single time. Eventually people will know it, right? That is what I tell you. It's like, eventually people will know it and you wonder how they're going to know it, right? People will know it, when like, you can overhear a conversation and which one is the smart one in the conversation. Like you don't, like you can also you can talk to a person and you can also clearly discern if it's like an accent or an inflection. When somebody's faking it and when somebody's from the place, right? So these little things that we know that like it's how we lean into who we are and what we do and how we insist on that as a way to search for knowledge, right? And I was teaching at Rice, and at that time, and then I was following the cleaning crew of the idea of the invisible labor come to play, and I was like, I started.
Now here's why you can win.
I started following the cleaning crew in the stadium at night. So in one screen, it was a 3-channel video. In one, I had one of the cleaning crew members drawing the strategies that they used to clean the stadium. So because of this audio, it sounds
one can have is 100. That's the way we'll approach it. And let's say here I am, someone that really only has, based on that 100, a 75% or 75 ability. And over here, it's someone that has 85.
So it's a pep talk, and one of the guys is making the strategies to clean the stadium while I follow the cleaning crew overnight, clean the stadium, because there is a season when there's basically games every day. It's kind of deal. What's funny? It's more. There is a lot to this video, right? When being in Houston, and I thought I would not find a lot of Latinos working in the industry, and I thought it would be good because I could interview them, and and I used to clean spaces. But then I realized that like Rice University, this is they're like basically all the cleaning crew is ex-inmates and people that so they pay them really little and under the table. So there's a contract. I don't know how they get away with it, but basically the whole crew is older black men because basically they hire ex-inmates, and there's like, so I was like, oh, this is something, but I don't know. Sometimes, the same with Maria TV. There is issues when you make a movie that they are not for you to answer or resolve. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how it's to be like a middle-aged black man incarcerated. So like, I just want to stay. I interview them, I have a conversation, and there could be a video I have. But in the same way, when you're talking to a lot of like working class women, there are gonna be a lot of stories of sexual violence, but I'm not the one to tell those stories. So hours of recordings where they are telling about how a boss abused them or how, they don't know who is the kid's dad. The stuff like I just cannot touch. So there's going to be a lot of information that is officially interesting. But not everything that is interesting lends itself for you to make art about. So like, because I don't have the sensibility to know, I don't know how it feels that. Not because I don't understand it. And that is very important to like, also, as I say, when I moved to Houston, I started making work about like, at that time I was dating somebody in Richmond. So before I lived in Boston and I lived in Seattle, so I have never seen Confederate monuments. But I'm gonna try to go fast. So when I think about Confederate monuments, I mostly think about like that I grew up in the same conditions, right? Like I grew up with like every train station in Chile is under a colonizer, right? So it's like, it's not new, right? It's not more or less fucked up because this happens, under the memories of your grandfather, right? So like, but I'm more curious as an artist. Know why somebody will, it's very clear why somebody wanna have this, power structure in place. There is no doubt. It's like you can be mad, but there is no doubt why they wanna keep some certain structures of power. There is two ideas I really like to think about this. When you're young, you don't care about any of this shit, Like not until you get to college, you didn't care about, where, like maybe now that there is a lot of internet stuff, you learn very young how to repost stuff, right? Thank you. But it's like, so like it's just weird because like when you're young, you are just like, I just gonna drink with my friends by the foot of the colonizer's legs, Like this person is terrible generally, right? But if you're like 14 and the person you have a crush wanna make out with you, you're not like, I can't. This guy, if you read a book or two, you just do it because you don't care, right? Like, so like, it's like what it takes, and that's gonna become part of your best memories. So how do you deal with that as an adult? So what it takes for, so I was like, I wanna feel that there is landmarks and there is things that are important in my life. So I start thinking a lot about these animitas, these roadside altars, right? Because I only have 5 or 10 more minutes, I'm gonna just go really fast and this is gonna be mind-blowing, it's weird, okay? So I start thinking about monuments for the people. I really like that idea. Monuments that people do for the loved ones, people that don't need to be a hero or any kind, right? So I did this show in Houston where I make this like all the qualities of monuments, And then as a photography project, I started doing all the ways I could manage these 4 or 5 slides into some image project, right? I did this show at the Drawing Center where I used this landscape, something that's very similar to the show I'm doing now, where the Drawing Center is a non-collected institution, so I decided to make an image transfer directly on the dry walls when they were remodeling, so they could paint over and I could be in the permanent collection, right? So like, then I made this body of work about labor union, disappeared labor union flags, which is very important to me. I think it's very fascinating how much the collective spirit is gone and the syndicalism and like unions are just disappearing. It's truly like, and I think this idea that everybody is doomed or destined in America, that everybody is like a secret rich person, right? It's like you are destined to be rich, right? It's like, so you just have to work really hard and whatever. And it's fucked up. As a photographer, like you grew up looking at images of like Walker Evans or Dorothea Lange with all these like FSA photographers from the Pharmaceutical Administration, from the Great Depression, right? And that is such a like early good American brainwashing, right? It's like this idea that like there is beauty and poverty, and as long you can grab yourself from the bootstraps, and there is dignity and poverty, and all these messages that these kind of narratives tell, which is like they're quality artists, but sometimes you say stuff that you didn't meant, and that is the beauty of making art. Sometimes the work has to be smarter than you. Sometimes it's more evil than you. Sometimes it's more pleasant than you. and you cannot control that, right? But, if you want to be a political photographer, mostly, there was a million photographers doing during COVID, at the hospitals, during the public housing crisis in 2008, right? But I don't see a lot of photography of like how Jeff Bezos is living right now, right? It's like makeup that just shows so people there's a riot, show how the rich person live. It's it's like it's how I have a lot of. It's not super subversive. It's a problem is I make a video, but I have to about it. It's fascinating, right? Because we are like in a Ivy League institution with a lot of prestige. And last year, when the the affirmative action went away, a lot of people were worried and concerned. UCLA haven't had affirmative action in 25 years, right? And we have a very diverse group of students and group of faculty, and we did that. It's not a mandate, right? The people that formed the institution should do that, no legally, right? But part of me is like, it's good that you guys come here, whatever. It's not an attack here. It's just thinking that like the outrage of not having diversity is also in certain Ivy League. Personally, I don't know if I need a lot of Ivy League educated people of color, but I would like to have Ivy League-like education in community colleges, in places where poor people already live, right? So if you don't reallocate the fundings that you take from all these diversity projects into actually where people needs it, and so you bring the middle a little higher or tie the levels, right? So sometimes the complaints are like, yeah, it makes sense that you are angry, but also it's like, shouldn't you have been angry before too? So it's like, so I make this body of work. That led me to the idea of like people don't really know how to protest in USA, and really not anti-Black Lives Matter. You didn't really see a lot of protests. So the fact that a lot of that you have marches of, again, it's nothing against Palestine or Israel protests, because I think they're very valuable, very important to position. But the fact that like a lot of college students have never protested about interest loan rates is fucking crazy to me, right? That like it's so much this like big feeling in USA of protests and nothing that really affects your life, where if you actually would not have to go to work or be indebted to this education, you actually could protest well, because you're not afraid of losing your job, because you are not afraid to pay your student loans and get in default and get by the student credit. You know how like the ball of things go in a way that like it's not about protesting about anything. It's about like actually feeling that you will earn the freedom that you deserve with this education, the promise, of this education. So it's like, I start making I always thought that maybe it was a problem of language or education, right? So to me, when I don't know something, I start educating myself, not necessarily theoretically, but also like how people do it. How people do it in Ukraine, how people do it in Zimbabwe, how people do it in Mexico. What kind of protest, what kind of materials of protest people use to know how they express their culture in the time of social anxiety, right? So I start making sculptures and photos of kind of barricades. Right? And then part of the show, also, this body of work, I was doing light works in Syracuse, and I only can make 7 because I was making work in that with the money that this place give me, and the time and the space. So when I came back home, I finished the body of work with this mask that also people use in Latin America a lot, with like kind of like homemade gas mask. So I did a bunch of self-portraits with the gas mask, right? And then this woman that ran this gallery is so sweet. Like she let me fuck the place up so much all the time. Like I covered the whole walls in clay, and the past time I put that fake wall. I made this weird show where like basically the curator from the show, so the previous exhibition I did at Frye Museum when I did the spray paint and the scaffolding, and she was like, I want you to do the same, take over the museum. And I was like, okay. And then like basically I passed the walls exhibition, and I concealed the permanent collection of the museum, all the paintings that had to do with Manifest Destiny or Sublime. And then I just like, people could not see it, right? I put my paintings in front, and then like people only could see these paintings through the crack of my work. So it was just kind of like a weird statement about priority and protagonism rather than about importance, right? It's like, because also as an artist, sometimes you got MFA, you like, did all this residency, get all these awards, and finally one museum buy your work, and you're like, fuck, I made it. I'm in the collection, and then you go to their permanent collection balls and see it, they tour you around, and then they have so much art from those old couple that die, and they give them the work, and all those artists on the permanent collection, and it's a bunch of nobodies. And you're like, why? I'm gonna be in debt for the rest of my life because I wanted to get a degree so this museum could collect me. And they really just don't care about art. So I just like conceal it, right? Then I make another video. Then I had this show about then I start this long research about American abstract expressionism and the CIA involvement in USA politics, mostly on Latin America. So I started studying Louis Baltz. And then I was thinking a lot of Louis Baltz in terms of like Rothko and Frank Kleins and all the CIA involvement in the arts and how much, American consciousness, American spirit is really subsidized by the government, but actually, it's a weird thing because before this period of Rothko, Pollock, and Klein, America was like cheeseburgers and movies, right? It's like, so like now you can put yourself as they're the first famous international artists, respected worldwide or whatever, right? There is this wonderful book called How New York Stole the Idea of Modern Art. That is, but okay, once you're like doing all this thinking and then you read the book and you're like, he stole my research like 30 years ago, And so I start making all these images of like going to the studio as a painter and just start making all this work about like American, like with the gestures that a painter would do and like kind of try to again run out of ideas. That the whole idea is like, maybe it's a weird Lacanian feeling of like you're never gonna run out, but it's kind of like staying at the edge of like the feeling of wanting to not have more ideas and just like maximize it. And then the second part of the project was like examine how during all the dictatorship years in Latin America, when the CIA was doing a number in most of Latin American democracy, modernism was part of the situation. So every single time, so I was like, if there was a suspect here, every single time you made a modernist building, also was a dictator coming through. So I started blaming modernism into this dictatorship aspect of like Latin America and how, all these shapes. And again, these are reference images, the Mars Vo, masterpiece of installation art, right? Max Ernst, for no reason. Sometimes part of your art have to be because you like it. You can't have a reason to make everything, right? So I love this piece, Max Ernst. I've been trying to like rip it off for like 5 different projects. It makes no sense, right? So yeah, there's a thing. Look at that. You look at that piece. That piece is the Capricorn by Max Ernst. See? And then you see. So I've been just like trying to figure out how to make it right and how to still good, So I just make it this like little kind of condemned spaces of bureaucracy. And again, I used to work in concrete, so I can make it super nice, but also it's like they send up photocopies, the material of bureaucracy. There is no institution that is not made of concrete. So it's the right material to talk. And I made it, I just have to do a signal for the person telling me about the time, but so I just like it. And then I transfer all these materials as a photogravure, and then when I make the prints, I make them in this place where I raise the floor, again, the same gallery in LA that allowed me to do anything, like I wanted to and I raise the floor 2 feet, and then I put my ceramics so people have to walk around. There is something about, it's silly, but sometimes all things matter, right? It's like, the shit that you do with your body when you look at art is very important, right? Most of the time people put them at eye level, so you have to work the least amount with the expectation that hopefully you're gonna think really hard. But then you go and you don't do any on it because it's too easy, right? So I feel that if I do this thing with the floor where you can hear your steps and you feel something, then you start being aware that you're looking at stuff. And then you're looking down, and you never do that in galleries, looking down. And then when you look down, it's the most photographic experience possible because you become a surveillance camera of these spaces, right? And then I make this thing. And this led me to the third part, the research about like labor union movements in the factories that kind of like usher modernism. And I started making all this I was doing also the residency at the Smithsonian, where I was making the thing, when I was like getting this information. And then I also think about artists during that time in the 30s and 40s. And I thought a lot about Wilfredo Lam, this Cuban-American artist that lived in France and was part of the Surrealist movement. And then I saw a lot about Roberto Mata, a Chilean painter that moved to France also, become part of the Surrealist movement. So about this immigration and in between war movements is very important, right? No, because it happened in Europe, so a lot of the time you have a problem with like, whatever. But I don't care. And I mean, it's funny because when I went to Dana's class today, they were talking about like this like very amazing figurative black artists have the reference to Caravaggio and all this. It's interesting because it's like, the question is not what you're looking at, it's how you're looking at it. And I think that is very important. It's like you can just love a lot of stuff. It's how you love them, when you choose to love them, that really affect how you make the work, right? So when you look at now that I can show you the references, when you look at my work, that has all those qualities of Roberto Mata and the archival photos, but I build all these sets in my studio, right? So I have this, and I wanted to feel that they were empty factories, almost like they could belong to a stalker, the Tarkovsky movie, and or a David Lynch movie, or like sometimes like Metropolis, sometimes it's just ridiculous, but it's like almost like a B movie too about the future of work. There is this like very good book called the Piano Player. It's it's basically early AI fear in the 60s, right? Automatization, right? It's like I talk a lot about modernism had those fears, right? So I started making all these empty factories that they were terrifying. And this was a show at BRIC where eventually I make weapons with all the workers are gone, right? The factories are empty, and the workers are supposed to go outside and protest. And they made these weapons. And I made these screen prints that were basically time cards glued into canvas, and they're like about 60 by 90. And also I was doing the residency at the Dora Maar Foundation, where like she was doing the documentation of Picasso's Guernica while they were in this kind of like dubious relationship. So I saw a lot of the archives of her doing documentation, right? Damn, okay, fine. Okay, so I will tell you more later, but I made all these weapons as a screen print. And then I have this show in Colombia right now that is based on, this Michael Tosin book that is all these demons. And then this is how, then the second part, well, I just made a show about Operación Condor, not Operación Condor, but okay, I was teaching a class about the history of punk in Latin America. And the history of punk in Latin America and underground movements. So I remember when I was a kid, I grew up in the 80s in Chile during dictatorship, a lot of food shortages and protests. So we started making all this, and also I listened to a lot of punk. So I was like thinking, I have this archives of protests and punk, but I was thinking, what do I do with that work? And I started thinking a lot about all these pictures of gestures, all the way that people do, the thing that escape language, right? So I started making all this kind of like a museum, because also you go to museums, you feel out of the language of art. So I started thinking about like how I can make a museum for gestures, for the people's feelings, right? So I started making all these images, but it still was not enough because, the pictures still look like pictures. They're fun to make and they're interesting, and it took me a long time to make. I made the show. It's a very beautiful show, But then I started making some, because I felt that wasn't enough, I started making these ceramics pieces that they were kind of like amalgam. Again, this is maybe more photographic work because the illusion of the decisive moment in photography is so strong, but these ceramics actually mix 3 moments at once. It's the thing that photo cannot do. All the feelings you have when you're looking at a gesture, right? And also gestures are this perfect amalgamation of class, region, and time, which is very particular to get, right? If you see 2 guys talking, you're like 2 Italian guys, and you don't do it. You know what I mean? So I make this weird amalgamation where it looks like high class decoration, but it's actually like nonsensical, a lot of assholes and penises and fingers and So they have this kind of like weird jokey thing. And when I make it, I propose it to be kind of like a dark laboratory of ideas. And I just present this thing like that. And I present them with these clamps to hold them almost if were as specimens in a museum that you're supposed to understand. But they're just like, putting the tongue out, showing you their ass. It's like, it's just very obscene, very, very bad. And then I made this very short, and then I just made this, I was thinking a lot about when I grew up in public housing and also the public housing shortage in LA and how hard it is to be a young person and trying to find a place to live. So this is the place I grew up in Santiago, the public housing. And I was telling somebody, a lot of my photo is guided by that because if you grow up in public housing and all the houses are kind of cookie cutter, right? I never crossed my mind to ask people, where is the bathroom? Like their bathroom is in the place that my same house is in bathroom, right? But I have this association of like your decoration is different, your house smells different, something about the space feels different, and that is the difference, is the thing that makes you unique. Not really that it looks like, not different in the layout and the structure, right? So this is my, and also this building was for like state workers. So my dad is a mailman. All the people were cop kids, like firemen, people like that, right? So it's interesting. A lot of work, a lot of ideas I have is because like when you grow up in places like this, the idea of Sisyphean labor is very important, right? My dad is a mailman because that work never ends. You go to the military because that job never ends. You only want a job that hopefully never ends. You know what I mean? The idea of freelance is fascinating, mostly for your guys' generation, because it's like a 9 to 5 is for losers, right? But earning the right to exploit yourself is not. It's crazy, right? It's like having time out of the work to like do your life is not. But if you're working 24/7, it's super cool. Yeah, right? So like it's crazy, like the mentality of like how much this like freelancer capitalist mentality is like owning your soul, where you think like having a job in a desk is just soul-sucking. But constantly being aware of money and being short and have to send emails and like writing up is not. It's crazy, okay? So have a house, so I make this installation. Yeah. Okay, fine. I'm making a film noir too. Yeah, questions? It's so chaotic. Yeah? Somebody have questions? Any questions? Could you go to the have you guys seen those videos? Great.
I was intrigued by one of the films you made about the factory workers. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got their consent to do it and like the process of like filming them but not exploiting and also like presenting them?
The film. I didn't show it. It's something that you saw on my website or something?
Oh no, the one with his hand and
the cleaners. It's kind of hard because I did got the consent, sign forms, I pay them well. First, when you pay well to people, they will do a lot, Mostly people that, so I pay them well, I pay them actors' prices, not like labor prices, right? And second, you never know, when you're not, there's something in tension, right? So a lot of artists may work for the shocking value of making art, and sometimes it feels exploitative, right? Like Andres Serrano does it for like exploitative reasons. Sometimes you're transmitting something that they are doing, like I'm not, it's almost observing and talking about this repetition of labor is something that I think in my soul I'm doing, not exploiting them, also I'm paying them well, and also the thing that I'm talking is not about their labor, it's about the repetition of the labor. I guess when you treat people respectfully and like the barrio, the portrait that you do is I don't have a good answer besides like you feel it, and I don't feel like I feel that way. For example, in my pictures there is never people, and in the videos only people, and I let them talk and I let them be themselves. So my job after that video, there's interviews with them and stuff like that. So in the interview, I will never edit something that is not the way that is a good translation of how they felt while they're making the video. But again, good translation required knowing something about the culture, right? So that's the complete, something, I know something about the culture of being a worker. I don't know a lot about other parts of their culture, but so that I can use that knowledge to translate, right? If you translate literal things, then it's become the problem, right? Because if you try to show the labor, it happens in everything, right? When you translate a text literally, a lot of misunderstanding will happen. When you try to translate immediately how the labor and the hours, and then you don't let them kind of like participate of the experience and showing them, how they grab stuff, how they do stuff, let them explain themselves, be participant of the project, is then become more exploitative, I guess.
Hi.
Hi.
Really great talk, Rodrigo. Thank you. I have a question about your installations. It was really wonderful to get to hear more about your kind of thought process and the way that it's changed over your kind of trajectory from Diamond Box to kind of your more recent work. But I'm very interested in how, you are creating this kind of Gesamtkunstwerk of an experience where it's like you're really thinking about like every single sense that the viewer is bringing with them and how you can utilize it or manipulate it or enhance it or change it so that their experience of like what is ostensibly the work is very much kind of influenced by the environment that you're creating for them to view the work in, so that like the whole space becomes the work. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, you already spoken about like how you kind of come to making these particular objects or the images. But it's like, how do you, once you kind of have that conceptualization of the objects or the images and you build like the set in your studio, how do you then think about how you're going to show those things in space? Like, does that process like reflect the way that you go from ideation to like the work, or is it something that happens kind of simultaneously or afterward?
Yeah, it's a great question because you never know which one show up. I was just telling somebody about it. It's like the main thing you have to avoid is to put the art by the end, right? The installation, the display is not the way to make the work or the ideas artsy, right? In some way, then you have to get serious. Then you have to clean them up, present them in a way where it makes sense, where you use your kind of analytical mind to guide people to hopefully feel in the way you felt, right? When you're making work, there is a lot of free stuff that will come to play. And some of those free stuff may come handy by the end. Because through the process of making art, you teach something to yourself. Mostly you teach yourself how you think about those things and what is missing, right? It's not because I want to keep talking about the work, but for example, right now, I'm building this case for film noir as being the only class-conscious medium genre in America. Right? It's the only, if you see right now, all movies is Nicole Kidman in a rich house. It's almost the only people that can have problems is rich people. And even when people are working class, they still have 2 cars outside, that's like, even when you see movies like Nora, right? Like that's supposed to be a stripper, but like you never go to her house. All the action, all the drama happen in the rich guy's house. Only in one scene, they enters really quickly and shows that she has a roommate or whatever, right? So drama only can happen in the place of wealth, only can happen to rich people, very good drama, right? Through film noir, I think a lot about how much the criminal, the down in luck, kind of like freelancer goes into, they're the main characters, right? And they're in a set in the time where it's Prohibition, where it's McCarthyism, which very analogous situations to right now, right? So you get the post-Great Depression, McCarthy, all these things where they're very analogous to what's now. So I'm thinking about film noir. So the thing I'm thinking about is that sometimes for this whatever, for example, there are gonna be some elements where this thing, right? I'm thinking also about kind of the fragility of that existence, of the poverty and the precarity, where I researched a lot about these traditional Dutch soap bubble paintings, that they were their response to vanitas as a painting exercise, but also as a display of skill and craftsmanship, right? So I'm thinking through a lot of these like sets of like the vanitas and the soap bubble paintings, to think about this criminal underworld. So I have the picture of my dog, but it's like I'm testing the light, I'm testing the quality of the things, but I will use a lot of these kind of like moments of fragility of the worker to represent. So I think a lot of the sets gonna be based on this kind of like Art Nouveau aesthetic, which is kind of what rich people think is, it's like Art Nouveau feels like the poor version, what poor people think rich people are supposed to like, right? So it's a weird thing. So, but a lot of the time you have to go and build the set. So my idea is making this set as a construction, as a factory for Art Nouveau shed that is a bunch of construction workers making, right? But it's like you have to have certain freedom to think about it in the same way that that dark installation I did. I thought, because I was examining during the time, I thought about the basically neoliberalism was this kind of economic model that was mostly exported to Chile and tried in Chile. So Chile was this like laboratory of neoliberalism, and like a lot of even the last president went to Chicago to study under Milton Friedman. And so Chile has been always this laboratory of economic ideas, and that's why we are kind of like not super broad, but also because we have a lot of subsidies from USA because we've been protected for being their lab. So I thought a lot about this laboratory, and I wanted to make a dark laboratory. So that's why I make these tiles and this clean. Sometimes it's silly, but something unique happened when you thought about, like, I keep thinking about this like dark laboratory of ideas, and that could be the museum where this place happened. So sometimes it's weird, sometimes it's direct, but that is basically how I think through it. And it's just thinking through it, and sometimes there is little things, it's almost like a title of the movie, right? A lot of the time you find the title of the movie in one line and one character say, like halfway through the movie. And probably that is how it happened for the director too. There was untitled project until that person says something that kind of resonates with the consciousness of the movie. But you have to make it first, right, and then figure it out, right? If not, you become like, have you seen Ed Wood? That is a Tim Burton movie with Johnny Depp, but it's almost he goes to get movies and throw titles before the movie gets made. So it's like, what about The Brides Go to the Moon? And I was like, no, okay. And they start throwing titles and to get funding, right? And a lot of artists think like that. It's just like, what about if I made installation? But they still, and then I put something, and like it doesn't work like that. So, yeah.
Thank
that's
you.
it. You're welcome. Yeah, thank you.